It really gives me great pleasure to welcome our distinguished speaker today. Others have spoken, Judge McGuinness, former Judge McGuinness, of your illustrious and extraordinary career, spanning so many different areas of Irish public life as a former barrister, Dublin University Senator, President of the Law Reform Commission, and of course a judge in the Circuit Court, High Court and Supreme Court. And you've had a long track record on so many areas of human rights, of children's rights and family law reform, on end-of-life care, I know, with the Irish Hospice Foundation, and as patron of the Irish Refugee Council, and indeed most recently as during chair of the expert panel on GridLink and GridWest. But I'm delighted you're here to speak with us on the topic of children's rights in Ireland. I want to commend Senator Van Turnout, who took the initiative originally at our CPP to suggest that you would be invited to speak on that topic here today. And of course, Senator Van Turnout has also had an impressive record on children's rights, and I know that both of you played pivotal roles in the passage of the children's rights referendum in November 2012. And indeed, if one looks back, and Senator Layden and others have talked about the history of protection or lack of protection of children's rights, if one looks back, of course, it was your call, it was following your own investigation into the horrific Kilkenny incest case in 1993 that I think the first call for an amendment on children's rights in the Constitution came at that point when you made that call. And certainly there's a very, very strong need for that referendum, in particular to safeguard the position of children of marital parents who, as has been said, were unable to be adopted, and it's the amendment that has changed that. This state has had a long record of failings, and Senator Naughton asked a question, I suppose, about the cause of this, failings towards children, lack of protection of children. Some of it is to do, I think, with culture. One can't just blame state institutions or indeed religious institutions, and the state really handed over responsibility in so many ways for the welfare and education of children to religious institutions over the years. And yet, the state was failing in ensuring adequate supervision in those institutions. It's also important to say that this culture extended to families, to the private setting, and it was families who gave up their daughters into Magdalene institutions and into mother and baby homes, as we know. So there is a huge issue about the cause of this, and one can't lay blame either at the door of the church or indeed the state alone, because there was clearly a cultural conservatism and a cultural view of women and children, and a view of sexual morality in particular, that really meant that the treatment of children and of women was very lacking in terms of their protection of their rights. Now, I think things did begin to change, as we've heard, in the 1980s with the very important Status of Children Act, but also with hugely important practical change, the introduction of the allowance for single mothers, which at one move removed this awful dependency that women who were thrown out of their homes had nowhere to go. And I do know that certainly in the 70s, even where mother and baby homes weren't available in some places, there were schemes being run by other entities, by NGOs, I think, and I think maybe by councils also, for women to go into private families who were willing to take them in, where their own families had thrown them out. So there's a huge array of bad treatment and neglect of women who became pregnant outside of marriage that really still has to be exposed. I listened very carefully to what you said about the media frenzy, and I suppose really what we would call in criminology the moral panic that often arises when something like the Tuam case comes to light. And I think you're absolutely right that there's a danger that we descend far too quickly into a sort of the search for a scapegoat, the search for a blame, somebody to blame. But I think the merit of setting up commissions of investigation or commissions of inquiry, as we've seen, is that it does produce a measured set of data, of information for people. And one thing that we've learned from the mother and baby homes and from the other reports, the Ryan report, the Murphy and Cloyne reports, is the need for information and for transparency around sharing of information. I should say I acted in the past for many survivors of sexual abuse in institutions before the Redress Board, and one thing that really characterised so many of them was that they felt the lack of an identity, the lack of information about their origins. That's hugely important. I really welcome the fact that the Department of Social Protection and the GRO have released, for example, the death certificates of the babies who died in Tuam. I think that sort of information must be brought out there, and I do think we need to look at the issue of tracing of right to identity for children. It's also fair to say that there has been a strong commitment by this government to children's rights, and an attempt, I think, over a number of different areas to build up a framework of protection for children's rights, to ensure that we have a solid basis so that the sort of failings we've seen in the past won't happen again. The appointment of a first full Cabinet Minister for Children with Frances Fitzgerald and now Charlie Flanagan, the passage of the referendum in November 2012 and the insertion of Article 42A into the Constitution, the establishment of the Child and Family Agency TUSLA, and then the passage of a package of legislative measures designed really to deal with the problems identified in the Ryan reports and Ryan, Murphy and Cloyne reports and others. So we have the Withholding Information Act, which finally closed that gap in the law, making it a criminal offence to fail to disclose information about sexual abuse of children, the National Vetting Bureau Act, and now the Children First Bill, which we'll see being brought into law, and which will, of course, place the guidelines for child protection on statutory footing. But I suppose just to finish, we also have other important legislation coming up. The Child and Family Relationships Bill, I think, is hugely important in providing a proper statutory framework for children born in other family forms, non-traditional family forms, particularly children born to gay parents, children born through surrogacy and so on. That's hugely important now. And I do think we also, I very much welcome the government's strategy on better outcomes, brighter futures, the National Policy Framework for Children and Young People, which was just launched a couple of months ago, and which sets out a really clear strategy for the Child and Family Agency and others to take on board. But I think there's a number of areas where we still are failing children. You've identified them, I think, very clearly and eloquently. Children in direct provision, I think more needs to be done. And I would ask what is your view on what's the single best way to improve the situation of children in direct provision. The previous Minister for Justice has said, and we've all spoken with him and challenged him in this House on it, that his aim was to seek to reduce the numbers of families in direct provision and reduce the time spent, which itself is hugely important. But how else do we deal with that? Children in traveller communities, absolutely. And I would add to that children who are at risk of domestic violence. And I know Safe Ireland recently carried out a very potent visual display in Temple Bar, another campaigning moment a number of us took part in, just to illustrate the numbers of children at risk of homelessness due to domestic violence, and at risk of violence and at risk of abuse within the home. And I think that's an area where we still have a great deal more to do. And I thank you.